There's no better way to start off 2024 by what I imagine to be a very requested video on the channel because, well, in one of my top 10 videos, I think it was top 10 things I don't like about Yu-Gi-Oh!, I dropped hints that I may be creating a list or centering around the 10 reasons why I don't like the Blue Eyes White Dragon, which has been, you know, a commonly established thing on this channel for now. And we're going to be doing things a little differently this time. It's not going to be a top 10 list. It's instead going to be a top 5 list. Well, actually, a list of 5 reasons not ranked in any particular order, because for one, I'm not really sure that I could properly rank these 5 reasons which I've managed to come up with in today's video. And second, I actually tried to make a top 10 list, but when I was making each bullet point and each entry on the list, the other 5 started devolving around to stuff which is basically, how should I say, related in some form or fashion to the 5 main reasons. So that's why I decided to cut out the auxiliary reasons, the auxiliary 5 reasons for me not liking the Blue Eyes White Dragon, and just make it a 5 reason list. So again, it's not going to be a standard top 10 list, but it is a video you guys have been waiting for, and each reason is going to be explained in more depth than any other reason I give in the regular top 10 list, since we are working with a list essentially divided in half. Well, you've waited long enough, so without further ado, let's get right into it. So the first reason on our list is the actual look of the dragon itself. There's no better way to start this off than with the visual design, the first thing you actually see. Like many others, my first contact with this monster was as the card was the card art for the original anime, and by itself the design is okay, but not for a level 8 with 3000 attack and 2500 defense, which still makes him the strongest normal monster in the history of the game in terms of attack. However, its artwork would lead you to believe that it's actually a level 4 or lower monster, akin to cards like Kumori Dragon and Blackland Fire Dragon. In fact, Blackland would look far more convincing as a level 8 than him, if you ask me, of course. I once showed this artwork to my friend who knew absolutely nothing about Yu-Gi-Oh! And asked her how strong does she think that monster is. And she said, not much considering it's just a baby. This really speaks volumes of how misrepresentative this artwork is. The DSOD artwork and the Rush Duel artwork to an extent is undoubtedly the best representation of him, as it fixes the fact that it looks weaker than he actually is. And another thing which in my eyes is rather a prominent issue, the fact that the name lies to you, at least temporarily. He is called Blue Eyes White Dragon, yet 90% of his artworks and his very appearance until the DSOD movie, he is completely blue. No white to be seen here, so the more accurate name would be the Blue Eyes Blue Dragon until the DSOD movie, so props to the movie for actually addressing that, even though it took them 17 years to do so. My problems with the OG card don't just end with the artwork, they also extend to its flavor text. To better understand what I mean, well, I'd like to take a quick look at the flavor text for Dark Magician and Red Eyes Black Dragon. Dark Magician, the ultimate wizard in terms of attack and defense. Red Eyes Black Dragon, a ferocious dragon with a deadly attack. The thing both of these have in common is that they're both short, simple, and to the point. And for a pair of iconic monsters, this is perfect. I couldn't ask for anything more. Meanwhile, the Blue Eyes White Dragon has a flavor text saying, "This legendary dragon is a powerful engine of destruction. Virtually invincible, very few have faced this awesome creature and lived to tell the tale." Now, there are quite a few things to dissect here, so let's just dive right in. First of all, compared to the previous two examples, this one is noticeably more bloated, which in my eyes is a bad thing, as all this talk about one's power gives off an all bark and no bite feeling, which, considering we're talking about the Blue Eyes White Dragon here, makes it very funny. Plus, the writing of this flavor text also gives me the feeling like it was written by a 10-year-old describing his favorite superhero, which is also very deflating. Now, I know that you could potentially argue the same thing for elemental hero Neos. However, the thing about Neos is that his flavor text describes then the pretty uncommon contact fusion summoning method, which is something that would become the basis for just about every new extra deck summon method, making his flavor text iconic on an entirely different level, as Neos was the envoy for all of these innovations to come. So the bottom line, in order to make the text of Blue Eyes more in line with the other two monsters and more threatening, as well as the text would go something along the lines of this: a legendary dragon housing near limitless power. Now that sounds so much better. Alright, now we're done with the reasons which are directly tied with the original card and move on to the other three reasons which are more general. The first being that the character who uses this archetype, Seto Kaiba, I don't like him. No sir, I do not one single bit. Where do I begin? Well, first off, I never liked, cared, or had any sort of interest in the sort of character that Kaiba falls in line with. A character which most of his time acts like a total douchebag for absolutely no reason at all, and most of his douchebaggery comes from the fact that he's super rich and powerful, and in his eyes only better than anyone else, making him incredibly one-note. Granted, this is the same problem I have with someone like Priscilla Beriel from ReZero, if I want to give an example. However, the main difference here is that, for one, Priscilla is a side character, at least at the time of this video. We'll see what Season 3 brings, while Kaiba is the second main character who were forced to endure for over 200 episodes, and ReZero, in the time of Priscilla's, how should we say, main dominance on screen, had 25 episodes at the time, given that it was only Season 1 where she was prominent. And for the second reason for Priscilla being superior, in massive quotes there, it's like Aldebaran said, she's got big boobs, so that's why I tolerate her. Anyway, throughout the entire series, everything that Kaiba has ever done was either because he wanted to best Atem, he wanted to improve or preserve his company, or he wanted to save his brother Mokuba, who was kidnapped numerous times throughout the show. Okay, so let's start with Mokuba first. While the fact that Kaiba always went all the way to save Mokuba and preserve his safety, making it seem like he does indeed care for him, during the times when Mokuba wasn't in danger, the Kaiba brothers barely ever shared any moments together to make them feel like an actual family, not counting the flashbacks. All the time that Mokuba wasn't in danger was spent on either hand on defending his company from various threats, which I will admit was not a factor too often in the series, and most of the time his company was in danger in the filler arcs rather than in the main story. Or it was spent on him trying to defeat Atem, which gets very tiring and repetitive in the long run. And again, we're talking about a 200 episode series, maybe even more. I'm not exactly sure how many episodes the original DM has, but still. Now, what does this all have to do with the Blue Eyes White Dragon, you might be asking? Well, quite a bit, since all this time in the series is spent on the things I already mentioned previously. Barely any time is spent explaining how Kaiba got introduced to his ace monster, how he became enamored with it, how Priest Seto became Atem's rival, a more in-depth explanation of his connection to Kisara. Is Kaiba actually Priest Seto's reincarnation, or is he his descendant? You would think that all of this would be elaborated on and fleshed out, at least in the Dawn of the Duel arc, but that never happened. But what's worse is that throughout all the non-filler arcs, we actually see the show alluding to those questions that we want answers to, but in the end this never ends up happening. It's really mind-boggling because the other two ace monsters, those being Dark Magician and Red Eyes Black Dragon, do get their origins elaborated on much better, if that actually means anything here, and yet the Blue Eyes White Dragon gets rather shafted in that department. Of course, another main reason for my disliking comes from the quality of the archetype itself, which is something I alluded to in the top 10 list mentioned at the start of the video. And I've actually made an archetype analysis for the Blue Eyes archetype, and they've made several appearances throughout Archetype Rematch series with some new support. But to make the long story short, here the main fault of the archetype is that it's heavily reliant on the player running the original normal monster brick without having any good ways of getting him onto the field or using him to fulfill a certain purpose. The sole exception being when you use him as a cost for trade-in, and I imagine that Blue Eyes decks would become literally unplayable if trade-in were to get banned for some reason. The vast majority of the archetype's support cards either enable you to search him specifically or, on rarer occasions, other members of the archetype, and the other majority are very underwhelming stun locks or battle phase buffs. The other problem the archetype suffers from is that a single piece of interruptions is enough to make the archetype fall flat on its face and go to game 2, so obviously the solution here is to run more hand traps to better defend yourself against those sort of interruptions, but this then causes you to open up with terribly unplayable hands in 99% of the duels with this deck. Check out Civit's video, which is a perfect summation of what I'm trying to say here. The archetype's latest batch of support, not counting the support card that was unveiled very recently before I even wrote the script, is actually something I called the step in the right direction for them, but it's still far from what the deck would need to be solid in any sort of way. And the fifth and final reason is also something that I've alluded to in the past, that being Konami's over-obsession with the original monster as well as its entire archetype. Now granted, this does apply to the entire Duel Monster series pantheon, but the Blue Eyes archetype is by far the worst offender here. Like I said in the past, this gets on my nerves because not all Yu-Gi-Oh fans care for the original Duel Monster series, so repeated focus on it results in other archetypes from later eras getting heavily shafted and forgotten about in some cases. And in the case of Blue Eyes White Dragon and its archetype, the former also holds true, but is, even accentuated with all the stuff mentioned in the previous 4 reasons. We actually haven't gotten any new Blue Eyes support in quite a bit, and honestly I do hope this streak continues for several more years. Again, the script was written before the new card was revealed, but anyway, that is it for today's video, and I hope I've managed to clear this long-awaited topic. I'm presuming some of you were wondering, given how many times I've actually bashed on this archetype and the original card and the character who uses it in my previous videos. So I hope this managed to clear something up, and now that you now see where exactly I'm coming from. So until the next video, which is most likely going to be the start of the Prince of Persia Lost Crown Let's Play, see ya next time and have a good one. Thank you all so much for watching. Stay tuned for more videos and updates. Have yourselves a great day, and I will see you all next time.